Welcome to the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This podcast is dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like all the best bookshops, this podcast is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. So tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book at the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. I'm Stacey Horan, author, book lover, and host of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This is episode number 192. For more information about this or any of our episodes, go to my website, staceyhoran.com. If you enjoy the podcast, leave us a review, like us on social media, and share us with your friends, family, and fellow readers. In today's episode of The Bookshop at the End of the Internet, I'm chatting with author Michael C. Bland about his new science fiction trilogy, which he has crafted with both thriller and dystopian elements. The first two books in the series are out now, The Price of Safety and The Price of Rebellion. Michael chose to set this story in the year 2047, and it is inspired by our world as it currently stands. He started with the premise that technology can make our lives better, but it can also be used against us. What if, while no one was paying attention, someone out there was actually paying attention to everything? In Michael's near-future world, everyone has a computer implant. In fact, not having one is illegal. But that technology ends up in the hands of bad actors who do not have everyone's best interest at heart. Michael is hard at work on the last book in the trilogy, and we look forward to book number 3 in the very near future. In this episode, I'll chat with Michael about his writing journey, how he started with comic books at the age of 10, and why his first job in finance, as a debt collector, is ripe with stories for future books, as well as a few other things. Coming up. Michael C. Bland, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I thought what we could do today is start by talking about your new series. You've got 2 books out in this series. We call it the Price of series. I was wondering if maybe you could introduce us to what you have created, the world that you have created for this series, and then we can talk about the books in turn. But maybe start us off with a general overview of the series and what inspired you to start writing it.
Sure, absolutely. So the series is set about 25 years in the future. Technology, which can enrich our lives in so many ways, can also be used both for and against us. The world that I've created, they've gone through some tough times, epidemics, terrorist attacks, growing crime, but they've been overcome through perseverance and various advancements. People are safe now, crime is nearly non-existent, and the planet seems to be in good shape, but cracks form as the novel progresses. And my inspiration was that it's inspired by the world as it currently stands. We're already tracked in ways we don't always pay attention to. Our phones listen to us, more and more cameras are being installed, and there's more personal data known about all of us than any prior generation in history. And specifically what inspired it was when I was living in Chicago when I was on the L one day, and I looked around and every other passenger their nose was buried in their phone. And I thought, I could stand around here naked and no one would notice at all. But at the same time, there are cameras on the ceiling. So while no one is watching, someone could always be watching. And so that got me thinking, how in that kind of world, in the world that not only that we currently have, but where we're going, is how much more will we be tracked, monitored, and cataloged? And how would you protect yourself, and specifically people that you love, that you really care about, in that kind of a future? And that's what led to the trilogy. And I believe that the story is different than other science fiction type novels in that it's focused on the main character's family. Because of my thought behind the series, I focused on Drake and Tara, the main character, trying to protect his 2 daughters and his wife as he discovers that his technology has been stolen to serve a federal agency that doesn't have everyone's best interests at heart. He's forced to juggle protecting his family and fighting those who are manipulating the country.
Right. So let's talk a bit about Dre, your main character, and also maybe you can introduce us to his family, because as you mentioned, family is really central, key to this trilogy.
Right. Dre, he's a skilled engineer. He strives to make the world better, specifically for his two daughters, and is a partner in a company that develops new technology. His older daughter, Raven, she believes the world. What drives her, she really wants to protect others, help others, but she also believes that the world isn't as rosy as it all seems. So she begins to rebel. Their younger daughter, Talia, she's a 12-year-old Spitfire. She's extremely smart, opinionated, and doesn't really like rules very much. Dre's wife, Mina, is very successful on the political side, works for the Los Angeles mayor. So they're all smart, accomplished, and they seem to have their heads on straight. So how the book starts is Dre's lighting a fusion reactor when Raven calls because she's in trouble. So she began to rebel, but she'd broken the law. And while defending herself, she accidentally ripped out her boyfriend's implant. Everyone has a small computer implant in their head, and they have clear computer screens in their eyes. Tampered with. Doing so carries the death penalty. So Dre is forced to cover up her crime, and this leads him and his family down a path where what seems to be a near perfect society that Dre helped create begins to shatter. Forced to run, then try to fight back against those agents who are much more powerful. And in the process, he learns that Raven was correct. The world isn't as it seems, and his own technology helps hide that ugly truth.
Can you tell us a little bit more about this world that you have built? Because as you mentioned, the series is near future science fiction, so not that far away. It feels like this is within striking distance. So maybe tell us a little bit about this world that you have imagined.
I really try to make it as realistic as possible because not only to immerse the reader and make it believable, but also because of things that I did a ton of research for this book before I started writing it and wanted to make it as as tangible as possible. And what's a little scary is actually some of the technology I imagined has already started to be created. In The Price of Rebellion, the second novel, there is a piece of technology that I imagined called a DNA scanner. And we all leave little bits of, dried skin, dead skin and hair follicles and everything as we move about our lives. Well, I imagined that there was a machine that could pull those dead cells and that the hair follicles or the hair out of thin air, pull it into the machine, run the DNA, and identify you. The scary thing is, I read an article recently that there is a company that has actually developed that, which is also a little scary to think about just in general, let alone on top of the fact that it was in my book and what the bad guys used it for. So definitely that kind of technology, Elon Musk with his, he's developing implants to put in people's brains and really seeing how the technology that I've been developing that actually in a maybe worst case scenario, but some of that technology really could come to pass in the next 20, 25 years.
You've talked a little bit about how the series opens, right? The series opens with book one, The Price of Safety. So you've given us sort of a clue into that book. And the storyline continues through the trilogy with the second book that's out, The Price of Rebellion. Can you discuss a little bit about what we know from, say, the first book and into the second book?
So Dre and his family, of course, they go through the ringer in the first book. I mean, it's something you wouldn't want to wish on your worst enemy, right? So they go through a horrible time in the first book. They come out the other side, but Dre and Raven, they've discovered the extent of the threat that they face, which affects everyone really nationwide. So they discovered secrets and also suffered heartache. In The Price of Rebellion, the second book, Dre is now fully committed. He's joined those who have also learned the truth, who want to take down that agency that has lied to everyone, that manipulates them and has hurt so many. But also for Dre, it's personal. He wants to avenge the loss that he suffers in the first book. Before he and the others rebelling against Washington can strike, the agency attacks their headquarters with devastating consequences. Dre and the few survivors are forced to run as they're hunted and the agents are closing in. Then he makes a discovery that could change the tide, revealing all of those lies to the entire country and changing the course of the future. As he and the other remaining rebels prepare this really bold offensive, his wife, Mina, broadcasts this preposterous claim, one that just rips him apart, and is faced with this really terrible choice to either continue to fight this rebellion to try to help everyone or to chase this desperate hope. He chooses affects the whole country.
And the plan is a trilogy, I understand, for this. Is that still your plan is still to end with book 3?
Correct. I've mapped out everything for the third book, and I'm about a third of the way through writing the rough draft on it.
Okay.
So I know how everything ends. I know what happens to all the characters, good and bad. I might have some people yell at me. My wife's threatened to make me sleep on a couch if this one character doesn't survive. So it's going to be interesting what happens.
You mentioned that you have a map, an outline for book 3. Did you do that with all of your books? Is that your writing process? Are you a plotter more than a pantser?
Yes, I'm definitely a plotter for 2 reasons. One, I tried doing the pantser one time. It was a train wreck. I mean, as a writer, you're sitting there going, "Where's this book going, and how can I end it?" I mean, that's a bad sign, right? So I definitely that's not for me. And so I work better. My brain works better. The story works so much better when I plan it all out. And then on top of it, this specific story, because I have a series that is all about hyper communication, hyper tracking, monitoring. And so there were some great ideas, some great events that I had that I had to throw away because it didn't work within the logic of my world. It didn't fit with it. So I had to definitely plan it out. Now, when I was first writing the first book, I wasn't necessarily planning on doing a trilogy. It was this story and what I wanted to pursue. But then as I'm creating the outline, the analogy that I use is like the original Matrix movie. Okay, it has a beginning, middle, and end, and at the end, Neo is the one. Well, then he goes to that phone booth and has that call and basically says, "Watch out, I'm kind of coming for you." So it opens up this bigger world. That's what the price of safety was. It's beginning, middle, end, but then opens up to this bigger world. And then so as I was writing the first one, I was already planning books 2 and 3.
And in writing and then doing subsequent planning, you mentioned you had some great ideas that you had to toss because it didn't work. Did you ever find that you had committed to something in the writing only to find later that it would have been helpful if you hadn't, or you took a detour, the story takes you on a detour away from something that you had originally planned?
Really, it was more on the character side. There, for example, there's this one character in the first book, this guy Garley, who he's this kind of goofy scientist. Originally, I just planned to be just this minor character. I had a couple things, and then would walk off stage and be done. When I wrote him, though, he just absolutely leapt off the page. He was a blast to write. He was so much fun. He added so much more than I had expected. And so I'm like, okay, he definitely has to come back. So he came back in the second book, and then he's also going to be in the third book as well.
In writing a trilogy, keeping the story going, do you have a, let's say, secret formula for keeping up the tension across not just each book, but across the series as a whole?
Really, for me, it's like, for example, the outline for book 3. This is going to sound really bad, but it's 133 pages. It's this huge outline, and as I've started to write the third book, it's already becoming a much bigger book. And I did this on the second one as well, where it ends up becoming this bigger book than what I want it to be. So while in a way that's very painful, it means I have to cut more, and so as a result, I'm keeping just the best bits. I'm killing a lot of my children as a result because I'm having to leave a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor. But as a result, though, it's increasing the tension because I'm keeping only the absolute best parts of the overall story. So it's not really a good plan. I'd be smarter if I had planned that out better before I started writing some of it. But what it does, though, is I think at least it really makes the story move so fast.
And do you do that editing at the end when you're done with the book, or are you one who edits as you write the draft?
I usually will wait until I'm done with the draft to edit it. But this third book, and I think because with this third book, because I know the world and the characters so much, I'm, like I said, I'm about a third of the way through, but I know I'm going to kind of stop and go back and delete some of the things, clean up a little bit, so that, like, it's because it's kind of bothering the back of my mind that I know that, okay, I need to cut some of these things, and so I'm going to go back and clean that up, and then stop on any other editing until I actually get the draft done, because you can start going down a rabbit hole if you write, delete, write, edit, back and forth. So,
Right.
so you understand. So instead, I'm going, okay, fine, going to do this one, stop, clean up some of my mess, and then dive back into going forward.
Yeah. Do you enjoy the editing process?
No, it sucks. It's painful. It's like, but this is such a great scene, and this is so clever, and this is so much fun, and it would really add. But you have to do it. You have to cut some of the things that, while they might be great and fun and all of that, then you can't keep it. Now, if this ever goes into like a limited series on Netflix or something, and they want to splash things out in some additional content, sure, I'm gonna keep drafts of this, but I doubt you know I doubt that'll happen. That they'll want the additional content. They'll just want it as tight as the actual stories are.
Yeah.
It's painful. Yeah.
When the series is done, do you have plans for more books after that? And do you think you'll write more science fiction, or any interest in exploring other genres?
So I've had people ask, or is it just going to be 3 books, or is it going to be longer? And the one thing that I want to avoid is the series, and there's a couple that come to mind that are great series, the first few books, but then later books, it's like, oh man, just maybe you should have just ended the series. I'd rather keep it tighter, and there are more that I could write versus continuing to try to squeeze story out of a lemon that's empty, kind of. So at least my plan for now is, after the third book, I'm going to then move on to something else, because this is a complete story. Complete middle, beginning, middle, end. It's tight, it's strong, and then move on. Then after that, I mean, I could return. There's actually a character I thought about doing a separate series for that character, but I also have a number of other ideas. I lean a little more towards the sci-fi, but also towards the thriller. Price and Safety was a finalist for both Science Fiction Novel of the Year and Thriller Novel of the Year. So those are the two main genres that I kind of lean towards. So either a science fiction or possibly a thriller novel would be after this trilogy.
And any other goals for your writing journey? Anything else you want to do as a writer?
Well, I'd love to be able to win a Hugo Award. That'd be kind of cool. And would love to see like this series as a either a movie or a Netflix. Even though my publisher did have a good point, thought that if they made movies out of these books, there just so much would be cut, because otherwise the movie would be way too long. So I think a series would be fantastic with this. Could really explore this world and technology and all the twists and the turns, crazy stuff that I have in the series. So that would be a joy to be able to see that turned into a series. But other than that, just continue to write and entertain readers with some of my crazy stories.
Have you always been a writer? Is this something you have always wanted to do?
I've always been a storyteller to a degree. When I was 10 years old, actually, it's kind of funny to say this. When I was 10 years old, I created 3 comic books. I wrote the stories, drew them, and made these 3 comic books. I still have them somewhere. My mom was a back rat and she kept them. So maybe someday those will be worth something, or at least some laughter from people. And I've always gravitated towards writing, but I never really pursued it until, ironically, until after college. And went to college, had a 4-year degree, actually in finance. My first job out of college was in collections, which included repossessing cars, which I'm not the most imposing guy. I'm like 5'9" and not very big. And so to repossess cars, I mean, got some great stories out of it, I'll tell you.
That's right for a book.
Oh, trust me, I could definitely do some really, really crazy stories. And, I think I tortured my parents with some of the stories they told, like, yeah, I got a knife pulled on me tonight and da da da. And they're like, what? Yeah, that was definitely interesting. But that's when I realized, I'm like, wait, is this really what I want to do with the rest of my life? And so that's what gravitated me towards wanting to actually pursue writing as a true legitimate um, avenue. And here I am, many years later.
And what do you find to be the hardest part about being a writer?
Oof. I would say part the editing, because you have to not only cut scenes, cut minor characters, cut things that or change them over and over, and not to mention also then the editing of, do I say the sentence this way? Do I say the sentence that way? And you can spend 45 minutes staring at a screen to try to figure out one sentence, right? Yeah, the other aspect is just getting people to know of your book. Look, I don't expect everyone's going to be interested. Not everyone's a sci-fi fan. Not everyone is going to, love the story. But at least get the name out there and get people to know of and get a little interest in the book. Because there are just so many choices out there, which is great in a way. I love that there's so much content out there for people to enjoy. But it's also extremely difficult to get people to know of you and to take a look, because I do think that more than not, people enjoy it. I've had really good reviews. The Price of Rebellion, actually, I'm proud to say, was chosen as the best science fiction novel of the year by Indies Today, which was a great honor.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I'm very proud of it, and I think a lot of people, the ones that do read it, seem to really enjoy it. But it's just getting that name out there, getting more and more people to learn about it, pick it out,
Yeah.
pick it up.
And the flip side of that, what do you find to be the best part of this writing journey?
Ooh, best part is the creation stage, and everything is shiny and beautiful and bright, and every idea you come up with is so great and so amazing until you look back your notes later and you're like, no, it's kind of dumb. But I can make this better, right? So that's definitely again, you understand just the joy of it. And they're like, oh my goodness, there's so many possibilities and there's so many really cool things in your characters, and what do you want to have about them that is fun, what part of it is that they're struggling with, so building all of those things, that's part of the fun. The other part is hearing the feedback from people when they read your book, especially people that like I've known for years, but oh wait, you write books too, and then they read it and they're like, where did that come from? I loved it, and all those things. And so, well, yes, part of it, they might be a little nicer because they actually know you, but still the thrill, especially from strangers. I got one review from someone for The Price of Safety. I swear after I read it, I'm like, did I pay this person? It was such a glowing review. I'm like, it blew me away. I could not have described that first book as well as the person did.
Oh, very nice. Well, on this writing journey, you've written several books now. I'm curious, has there been any piece of advice you've received or picked up along the way from any source that has really made a difference for you, either in how you write or how you approach the business of writing?
The biggest piece of advice I was given was to take classes. My wife suggested the University of Iowa Summer Writers Workshop. Anybody that is learning to write, I highly recommend it. My level of my writing ability, my writing skill definitely increased. It's a night and day difference from before taking it to after. And at first I'm like, I don't need to take classes, or I bought a couple books. I'm like, that'll be fine. I can do it. I've read so many books that, I can write. No, I couldn't. It was bad. But after taking those classes, learning the actual mechanics, because at least once you learn the mechanics, then you can learn what to follow and what to discard. But at least you understand what is going on behind the scenes, what goes into the secret sauce kind of. The other aspect, the other thing that really elevated my my writing, which if I could, a piece of advice I would give someone else along with taking classes, is to have someone as a editing partner, someone who's another writer, someone who will be brutal with their editing. So I have a gentleman, his name is Robert Kerbeck. He's a great guy. He was also a former actor, so he also really understands character, that kind of stuff. And so he and I started like editing each other's works. So we would send each other a chapter of our work and edit it and send it back and then talk about it. And at first, it was brutal. I would get these pages back where he would X out entire pages. And he would just cut, say, this is not interesting. Would say, you need to do better here. You need to do this. And first, I'm like, well, I need to have a drink while I'm reading some of the stuff. And, should I really continue to write? But what it did is it really elevated it. Now, it doesn't mean he was always right. And also, keep in mind, he was doing a chapter at a time. So there were times that he was saying, well, no, this doesn't have any, there's no reason to have this in there, so delete it. Well, he doesn't know that in the overarching story, no, you actually do need to have it in there. So it taught me, one, to really edit myself and to learn what works and what doesn't, but also learn to, really decide if something is needed. And he would point out things that I hadn't even occurred to me, and would also add things in terms of, well, what about a character that does this, or why don't you have this person be, a little more lighthearted and do this and do that? Oh, that's okay, that could work, and to add things. So it wasn't just everything sucks and go away. He wasn't like that, but he also was, if he doesn't like something, he is not shy about it. And you really have a thick skin, which frankly also helps with other aspects of the writing journey of being a published author and getting your name out there and then seeing reviews and everything else. But I'd rather he be brutal and rip something apart versus it going out into the world and a lot of people ripping it apart.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That is a very good point. Excellent advice, actually, to find a writing partner you trust.
Yes, and you do the same to that person, is you tell them what works and what doesn't.
Right.
Be on both sides, and sometimes it's a little painful to say, no, this sucks. It hurt, not that it sucks, but just it doesn't work. The story's not working, or this character it's not believable what he or she did. Those kinds of things.
Yeah. Well, Michael, I'm curious if people want to learn more about you and your books and look out for book 3 when it's finally available, where can they go to find you and that information?
Well, the best place would be my website, which is www.mcbland.com. There, you can sign up for a newsletter there, and I periodically send out newsletters to let people know what's going on. I'm on Facebook under MC Bland Writer. I'm on Instagram at mcbland107. I'm on Twitter, and those would be the best ways to get a hold of me.
Well, if people want to purchase a copy of The Price of Rebellion or Book 1, The Price of Safety, where should they go to buy it?
They can go to Amazon, they can go to Barnes & Noble. There's also an audio version. If they go to my website and just click on the page with, for either Price of Safety or Price of Rebellion, their links take you directly to the audio version, to Amazon, to Barnes & Noble, to IndieBound, whatever works best for them.
Wonderful. Well, Michael, I want to thank you very much for coming on the podcast, and I want to wish you luck with the series, Price of Rebellion, the newest one out, your work in progress, book 3. Congratulations on everything you've accomplished so far, and best of luck with the rest of your writing journey.
Thank you so much for your kind words. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I really enjoyed it.
The Bookshop at the End of the Internet is a podcast dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like any good bookshop, this podcast features a wide variety of books by the equally varied and interesting authors who felt compelled to write them. This podcast gives you a chance to meet these wonderful writers and discover your next must-read book. Listen to the authors describe their books and tell you their stories in their own words. My interviews feature books from all genres and authors from all walks of life, including those who are indie published as well as those published by small presses and large publishing houses. Looking for unique, not so easy to find books for yourself, a friend, or a book club? Tune into this podcast and find your newest favorite author, or maybe a soon-to-be bestseller. This podcast, like all the best bookshops, is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. Tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book. You never know what treasures you might find in the bookshop at the end of the internet.